Fabulous. All right. Welcome to all to this Subject and Overview and Scrutiny Committee 3 meeting, which, due to government advice to the public to practice social distancing, will be held virtually, and committee members and officers accessing the meeting from remote locations. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Please can everyone ensure that all mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda on Tuesday, the 18th of January 2022. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times, you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help minimise any background noise and interference, and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. If any members wish to speak to raise a point or question, they should please click on the raise hand function at the top of the Teams window, and I will come to you in turn. Please do not use instant messaging chat to enter any questions or comments. And we will now move to apologies for absence. Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. So we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Gareth Thomas, Councillor Rod Shaw, Chief Officer Legal and Regulatory Services, Human Resources and Corporate Policy Kelly Watson, and the Chief Executive Mark Shepherd will be leaving the meeting at 10:30.
Fabulous. And just for the record, it's Councillor Gareth Howells who is being referred to Councillor Gareth Thomas. Fabulous. All right then. Has anyone else, other than those who have to leave the meeting early, because I know you're all leaving, you've told me. I don't think we need to put them in the minutes. Councillor Paul Davis? No, you haven't. Yeah,
it's just that, Chair. I was going to make it official that I'll be leaving about 10:20 for a meeting elsewhere. Sorry.
Fabulous.
Thanks.
Not a problem. All right then. So we will move on then to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. Do any members or officers have anything to declare at this point? Please raise your hand if you wish to do so. No? Fabulous. We'll move on then to agenda item 3, which is the approval of minutes. To receive approval of the minutes for the meeting held on the 4th of October 2021. Can I have a mover and a seconder for these minutes, please?
Move, Chair.
Moved by Councillor Gary Thomas.
I
heard a second. Second by Councillor John Spanzwick, I think that was. Thank you very much. Are we all in favour of that? I'll take silence.
Right.
It wasn't silence, but we'll go with it. Thank you, everyone. We'll move then on to agenda item 4, which is the medium-term financial strategy for 2022 to 2023 and also to 2025-2026. So I believe, Karis, you're going to be giving our briefing for this report. Am I right in thinking that?
You are. Thank you, Chair.
There we are. Thank you.
So if you're happy, just for the sake of the recording, my name is Karis Lord and I'm the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. So as you've said, Chair, this agenda item deals with the draft medium-term financial strategy for the period 2022-23 through to 25-26. The document sets out the spending priorities of the Council and includes a financial forecast for that period of 2022 to 2026, together with a detailed draft revenue budget for the coming financial year. Just very briefly, if I may, Chair, members will have received quarterly revenue monitoring reports in relation to the current financial year, and the most recent report was actually considered by Cabinet last week and does outline budget pressures across all services, and particularly in relation to this committee's around increased costs to do with waste. You also know that during the current financial year, Welsh Government has provided the Council with additional resources to meet the additional costs and the lost income that we've experienced as a result of the pandemic during the current financial year. So if I could take you to section 4 of the report, it outlines for you the current financial situation and also looks at the pressures that the Council may have as it moves forward into future years. The principles underlying the budget have been in place for a number of years, and they'll continue into the following financial year, so that the Council can continue to support some of its key services. Just very quickly, if I may, the principles underlying the the paper are that the council will seek to raise additional income. However, it is acknowledged that there will be limited opportunities to do this in the current year, given the immense challenges that COVID-19 has presented to the population of Bridgend. The council will continue to seek alternative ways of delivering services so that it can ensure greater sustainability and efficiency. After decades of substantial budget savings, the opportunities for large-scale reductions of this sort are very difficult, but this does remain an important component of the medium-term financial strategy going forward. The council will also continue to review all of its portfolio of building assets to look at either future income generation or rationalisation. And also, finally, the council will continue to review the level of services that's provided and prioritise these services that are deemed most important in terms of meeting the council's agreed objectives. So section 4 of the report details particular issues for each service area, and for those areas, particularly for this committee, within the proposed budget, the council is proposing to spend around £22 million on public realm services in the coming year. And it continues to be a challenge for the council to continue to meet public expectations for the highly visible and tangible services within the overall council budget. And the report does also outline what the council will do going forward to support the local economy. So if I may, Chair, just to outline for you the financial context within which this paper has been written. We received the draft provisional local government settlement on the 21st of December. And the draft settlement sets out the revenue and capital spending plans for 22-23, but it also gives some planned allocations for the following 2 financial years. So the headline figure for 22-23 for local government for the coming financial year was an overall increase of 9.4% across Wales. For Bridgend, the increase was a 9.2% increase. So it has to be stressed, though, that there are certain things that it's assumed that Bridgend will fund within that high increase. So there's additional funding in there to meet teachers' pay deals for the remainder of this year and next financial year. There's also funding to meet the increased national insurance contributions that we need to meet in the current financial, in the following financial year, and also some funding in there to meet the additional cost of introducing the real living wage for care workers. Information on specific grants has been available to us at an All Wales level, but we don't have the full detail for our authority as yet for all of the grants. One thing it is important to note is that there will be no hardship grant for the coming financial year, and therefore any ongoing costs in relation to the pandemic are expected to be met from within our budget for the following year. So the strategy going forward has been reviewed based on that latest information that we had from Welsh Government at the end of December. And the document starts to map out the likely scenarios for resources over the coming periods. As far as the 22-23 draft revenue budget is concerned, this assumes a 0% increase in council tax for the coming financial year, and this is due to the better than anticipated provisional settlement that we had, and also in response to the issues that were raised through the budget consultation process. Going forward, the scale of the financial challenge remains considerable, so there has been assumed an increase in council tax for the following 2 years. Looking at the information that we have and the likely scenarios, it's anticipated that we may need to find savings totaling £21 million between 22-23 and 25-26. There are assumptions built into these figures, which include issues regarding demographic changes, inflationary pressures, new regulatory and legislative requirements, and also increased staffing costs, which includes increases in the national living wage and in the national insurance contributions. To date, £4 million of budget reductions have been identified, so obviously this will be challenging as we move forward. What the paper does detail for you is the draft revenue budget for 22-23, and this is outlined in the report. And in this draft budget, cost pressures of £11.8 million are proposed to be funded, and these are detailed for you at Appendix A to the report that you have this morning. There are significant pressures to be funded. They include issues in relation to education, home to school transport and social care. particularly in relation to this committee, there are costs associated with waste disposal. As well as cost pressures, there have been some budget reductions proposed of 631,000 for the coming financial year, and these are identified for you in Appendix B of the report. It has been possible to reduce the sum of the savings as a result of the better than expected draft settlement that we've received. So, Chair, if I may take you to the recommendations, what we're asking committee to do this morning is to consider the information contained in the report and the attached appendices, and also to determine whether to make any comments or recommendations for consolidation and inclusion in the report to Cabinet on the draft MTFS, including the proposed budget pressures and budget reduction proposals within the remit of this Scrutiny Committee as part of the budget consultation process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Caris. Welcome to this committee. I believe this is your first meeting here with us in Scrutiny 3, so welcome. Right, I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to questions now. We're going to start with the body of the report, and first up I've got Councillor John Spanswick on CAT and the CAT process. Councillor John Spanswick.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Caris. And the question is more it was raised at the corporate scrutiny last week as well, and it's on page 13, and it's more about accuracy and correct reporting so the public can see what we're talking about when it comes to the CAT programme on page 13, because it refers to the £300,000 saving being made by transferring responsibility and management of assets. My understanding that £300 is a baseline cut that's already been made, and the question comment that was raised last week, and I'll raise it again today, is can we see the detail of exactly what has been saved to date by the individual CATs per site, to see what the actual total is from the CAT process, as opposed to the baseline cut to the budget, which was a lot more than just the CAT programme. And the figures are available because a couple of years ago, I was trying to help out with this process and was given a PowerPoint presentation showing the costs per site. Never been provided the detail physically, it was just shown on the screen. So the details are available, and I think we should be accurately reporting what has been saved by the CAT process to date.
Thank you for that, John. Janine, there you are.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And for the purposes of the recording, I'm Janine Nightingale, the Corporate Director of Communities. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Spanswick, for your question. Yes, we have got detail behind all of the CAT savings that we've put forward. You understand the background of all of this because, of course, you've been heavily involved in discussion and challenge with the CAT process. So for 21-22, the savings predicated were 300,000, and they have been met. Primarily, they were met for us not funding seasonal staff. As part of the CAT process, we didn't need those staff because of the transfer of some of the facilities, and additionally, it was during the pandemic as well, so some facilities weren't operating as they should have been at that time. But I think what is important for us to point out really is what you were seeking is detail behind the programme. Now, I could probably give you a report which details some of this rather than go into the individual sites today at the meeting, but let me try and give you some assurances about this process going forward. So as of November last year, we had transferred 19 of our facilities to CAT. 10 bowling clubs had been transferred, and there were 9 long-term CAT agreements. Now, with the bowling clubs, roughly the cost of the bowling green itself, maintenance for a year, is about £13,500 per bowling green. So we had 10 bowling clubs CAT transfer. One of them was a larger club than others, so we will get a full year effect on those bowling clubs of £151,000. And when I say a full year effect, of course, Councillor Spanswick, it's depending on when that CAT transfer took place, the saving will account from that point on. So from 22-23, pardon me, we should be able to get a full saving on those pitches. There are also an additional 2 pitches coming forward, bowling clubs rather, and in Griffin Park in Porthcawl Town Council, and they will be included on top of that saving next year. The other thing as well that we had was the 9 long-term cats at different clubs across the borough, and the estimated saving of that is around about £65,000, dependent on how many facilities they have, whether they're rugby pitches, football pitches, whether there's pavilions, etc. And the full year effect as of November last year is 215,000 when we carry those facilities into next year. Now, as of now and moving forward into 22-23, we've got an additional 10 sports clubs that are in the process of transferring out. And what we have been doing as part of the scrutiny recommendation that you've been talking to us about is looking at whether we can do short-term tenancies at will in the meantime, in order to transfer the facility quicker than the full term cat transfer, because the lease agreements take much longer to achieve. We have been trying to look at the availability of those. We're still doing the cat transfers in the background, but some clubs now have the benefit of that short-term tenancy at will. So back to the current situation. So we've got 10 clubs that we're working on, 10 additional sports clubs, and depending on the number of pitches and the type of pitches they've got in that breakdown of 10, we're estimating a possibility of another 70 to 100,000. Heads of terms are currently being prepared for 3 rugby clubs in the borough to self-manage their pitches, and that's around circa an additional £20,000. We've also got 7 town and community councils that are currently looking to progress 8 playing fields in total and some pavilions, and we're hoping to get some of this finalised by the end of March, 31st of March this year, and we could see savings of up to 30,000 from those facilities. So, and then the 2 bowling greens I talked about in Griffin Park earlier. So potentially a full year effect of those additional facilities of a further 146,000. So if we apply that to what we had done in the current year, we could be looking at over 300,000, which was our target. So for ongoing years, that's in place. Now, that isn't all community asset transfers that we have in place. Of course, there are a number of others, but we are getting to the end of the CAT programme now. We had identified about 50 possibilities for CAT transfer opportunities across the borough, and I think what we'll see is we are roughly in the 40s now over the next year. Now, a couple of things that we need to recognise really with this is that this is a recurrent saving, so we're hoping to save at least 300,000 year on year for the council. What it does do is it protects community sport by transferring those facilities into the community. There are 3 major parks that we're taking a further look at though, and we have spoken about this previously. Mystake Welfare Park, Newbridge Fields and the Planker in Nantymoyle. And we know that these need a different approach really to the caps that we are currently considering, because of the complex use pattern and the number of different clubs that use those facilities. So we're taking a review on those now, and we're going to come back to you and explain how we think we could manage those going forward. And the other thing I would point out really is that, and of course you know this, that we do some joint investment into those facilities when we transfer them over to CAT. And back in 2019, £1 million was allocated, a capital allocation for the CAT transfer process corporately to enable clubs to make improvements, to joint invest in those clubs between the council and the club itself, to make improvements, things such as pitch improvements and drainage, capital improvements to the facilities that they have. Now, to date, we've spent £628,000 over the last 3 years on grants to the clubs that are CAT transferring to improve facilities. And we've got about 372 available in the 22-23 financial year for joint investment going forward. Now, of course, an important bit about this is that we do maintain those facilities in those communities for community sport going forward. We know that it would be an incredibly difficult task for the council to be able to do that with our current resource picture that we have. So we think this is the way forward, that the clubs have been, dare I say, enjoying taking part in this, and are getting better facilities as a result and moving forward. So as things stand, we are comfortable with the CAT process. We feel it's been successful so far. The team, in particular, Guy Smith, who runs the team, is an incredibly well supported officer. I hear nothing but praise from the communities about Guy. He takes very pragmatic views about what we need to achieve in order to move this CAT process on. And we know that we should be able to achieve these savings year on year for the council moving forward, as well as improve those community sports facilities and ensure, really importantly, that community sport survives in the borough of Bridgend. So I'll just stop there, Chair, if I may, because I can see there's some hands up from our members.
Fabulous, thank you, Jean. All right, I'm going to go to Councillor Keith Edwards first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Not a question for Janine, but a question for Caris, if I may. 9.2% increase is seen by members of the public as a massive windfall for Bridgend County Borough Council in light of the cuts we've had year on year. Caris has identified where a lot of this money is to be spent in areas of which we have no control. We have to cover increased costs in education and other payments. My question is, what is the actual percentage increase available to spend when all these on costs are taken into consideration? Because members of the public are thinking that this is available money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. And you're right to point out that actually the 9.2% does sound a very high headline figure for the council. However, you're also right to point out that there are a lot of pressures against that money already. So, as I outlined when I introduced the report to you, there are significant pressures in relation to payment of the NI increase, which all employers have to meet now going forward from April. There are pressures in relation to pay awards that need to be met and fully funded. And you'll be aware that this year's pay award has not yet been finalised, let alone next year. So we've had to make estimates in relation to that. We have increased costs in relation to some of the legislative requirements that we have to meet, whether that be for additional learning needs, education. A new large one in the budget for the coming financial year is that we need to look to pay the real living wage for our social care staff, and that's not only that's you know, we're predominantly hit those staff who are working in the independent sector from whom we commission services, and our estimate alone for that is about £2.5 million at the current time. So actually of that increase, there's very little left with regards to new money. And I also outlined for you that there are significant cost pressures within the current budget for this year, again in relation to education and home to school transport, in relation to social care, and for this committee in relation to increased costs in relation to waste disposal, which we're currently reporting for the current financial year. And as you will see from the report today, there are cost pressures in there for the coming financial year as well. So actually, when you add all of those things together, there is very little extra money available for the council, even though we've had that extremely high settlement for this year. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, Councillor Edwards, did you want to come back before I go back to
yes, thank you, Caris. That does answer my question. Obviously, people expect to see things done when they see increases of this size, and councillors need to have answers to these questions. And obviously, it doesn't bode well for the future, because these costs will continue, and without increases of this magnitude, it doesn't bode well at all. Thank you, Caris.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Evans. Thank you for that, Caris. Right, I'm going to go back to Kat now, because that obviously was the first question we had up, and Jean was waiting for supplementaries. Councillor Spanswick, I assume that's what your question is going to be on.
Yeah, please, just to thank Janine for the answers. That's all I'm asking for is accuracy in reporting. But prior to that, is the request has been made for a long time, is just to have a list of the sites that's been transferred with the annual maintenance costs to see what the total saving actually is. Because there's a danger of double counting. Janine talked about seasonal staff and the cost there, and the cut for them being removed. But some of them are also used on maintenance of bowling greens. So we can't want to double count figures. And I'm not sure if we actually have 12 bowling greens in the county borough. And some of the bowling greens were previously self-managed as well. So I would just like to see, as a simple request, to see a list of the sites. I mean, I've not been a supporter of CAT, but I accept CAT is useful where a club or a community council want to do it and are happy to do it and able to do it and to be sustainable for the long term. That's great. But not all clubs want to do it. So I'd just like to see a list of, let's see all the CATs that's taking place, and well done to them, and hopefully it'll all work out in the future. To see what the real total cost is, because this 300,000 figure was a base cut to the budget, not a saving. And on the subject of special cases, Janine mentioned a couple, but there's one in Brackland, my own patch. Brackland Rugby and Football Club have been trying for years. They're interested in the CAT process, but are unable to do it legally because we have a school on site, Archbishop McGrath, who have control of the land there. So you've got some places there are special cases, and we have one in Brackland, but it doesn't appear to be taken as a special case because they're unable to perform a CAT, to go through the CAT. So hopefully they're not going to be penalised in the future, I hope, and that needs to be taken as a special case with the others. I know Guy has tried and is aware of it, and they do some great work there. But we do need to look at all the special cases as well. Thank you, Jean, for your answer. But I would appreciate the details sometime in the future. Well, just a list of the sites we transferred with the annual maintenance costs. We can see there's actual savings. Thank you.
Yes, no problem, Councillor Spanswick. We can provide you with that. I'm happy to do that. Yeah, that would be fine. And of course, yeah, we do understand that some areas are not as easy as others to CAT transfer. In fact, it's quite a lengthy process overall. But of course, we don't. Yes, I have Caris and the team ensuring that we don't double count on savings. But yeah, I can provide you with a full breakdown of that. That's not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Janine. I'm sure we'll look forward to that report. Okay, right. So we'll go back to Councillor Keith Hedford's question. Mark, I'm guessing that's why you want to come in? Is that when your hand went up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And apologies for jumping back and forth for the two, but I put my hand up, yes, to respond to Councillor Edwards, because I think it's a fair question. Janine has covered most of it, but I suppose I just wanted to make the point to members that we need to be careful that we're not seduced by that 9.2% increase. Caris has gone through a range of specific pressures around NI, real living wage, inflation at over 5%, and most particularly the fact that the hardship fund from Welsh Government ends, so it no longer exists. So you've got to cover all those additional pressures in social care, in education, early help, homelessness, etc., from your own budget. However, having said that, the settlement is more generous than anything we've seen for a decade. And I suppose what it's therefore allowed is a recognition of the cost of living crisis by proposing that there's a 0% council tax increase, and also meaning this year, again, for the first year, as long as I can remember, there are very few, if any, service cuts. So I think what members should probably do is regard it as a one-off. It's a generous settlement that allows us to, as I say, potentially not increase council tax, potentially not put any service cuts in, but I wouldn't be seduced by the figure beyond that, if that makes sense.
That Mark, I think, cut off there just in time there. Right, I'm going to then So, Councillor Alex Williams, is your question on this point?
Yes, it is, Chair. If you'd like me
Carry
to
on,
come in on this more general strategic point, which we mentioned in our pre-meeting. It's just to build on what Councillor Edwards and Mark has said. I think Caris mentioned in her opening remarks that in the MTFS and the budget proposals, we've largely been able to protect this directorate from some of the budget pressures which were expected to have to be made. So can you explore in a bit more detail in what regard you've been able to protect this particular directorate from the budget reductions, and what, given the fact that you've had a better than expected budget settlement, what budget pressures, what efficiency savings or cuts have you rejected or deferred to future years, first of all? And then sort of my second more general point is that obviously communities in the public realm have been largely taken the brunt of cuts because of political choices, and quite rightly so, to protect some of the pressures in education and social services over the years. Colleagues will go on when we're discussing some of the budget reduction proposals to talk about strategic regeneration and tourism and other political priorities. And clearly, as Caris mentioned in her opening remarks as well, local government is being asked to do more and more and more all the time, and is coming under significant pressure to deliver frontline public services due to regulatory and legislative changes and requirements. So my second question is, what in this particular directorate is statutory and what is discretionary? So clearly, in all directorates, there are political choices to be made. So it'd be interesting to hear from both Janine as the corporate director and the cabinet members for this directorate about what they feel going forward is sustainable in our discretionary delivery of services in this particular directorate. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. If I could ask officers to come in on the second question, because I've got a few more questions on the first one, so we'll deal with the second one, the more general question from Councillor Alex Williams. Janine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the easier thing to do, rather than to say what is statutory, is to say what is discretionary. And to be fair, I think the only things that we can say are discretionary in communities, because most of our services are frontline, roads, waste, health and safety through corporate landlord, etc., is the majority of the work of the regeneration team, with the exception of listed buildings, and the work of the economic development team. Those are not statutory obligations. But what I would say is they are incredibly important departments in order to achieve our wellbeing objectives and to drive the regeneration and recovery of the economy of Bridgend. Now, those teams, if we take my budget is 29 million, 19 million of which I can't change because it involves highways and the waste services. So I have roughly just under £10 million to deliver the majority of my services. If you look at regeneration and economic development itself, I think that's less than £1 million to deliver those services annually. But what they do bring in is a tremendous amount of capital via grant funding. The current capital programme that we're delivering is £53 million worth of work on site. It's been delivered via those two sections, of which 35 million to date is funding, grant funding, that has been secured by that team and brought in to do the work around the borough. And that doesn't include the ongoing work that we're currently undertaking. For instance, those teams are preparing levelling up funding bids, which could circa around about 40 million. And the levelling up fund bids we're looking at are for that Penprisk Bridge, removal of the level crossing, work to the Grand Pavilion in Porthcawl. But more importantly, some of the work that team does is working on our town centres, working up in our valleys. We've got our Transforming Towns grant that has operated via Welsh Government, and we've managed to in the last year attain £1.6 million of grants for retail establishments in our main town centres. We spent over 600,000 on 88 different commercial properties throughout the borough during the pandemic, getting people COVID ready. So whilst these teams aren't statutory, the work they do is enormously important in order to drive and deliver economic development in our borough. So what will be very difficult for us in future years is to look across the way we deliver services and to look at how we can make some efficiencies going forward, because the directorate, as you said, is very lean currently, with little resilience, and we recognise that. So what we need to do is to work smarter. We need to find other funding routes and other ways that we can, for instance, resource staff. We are looking at whether we can capitalise project managers, etc., to work on our big schemes, how we can work collaboratively with other agencies, other councils, working regionally with the City Deal and lots of initiatives and bringing in their expertise. So we need to look at other ways of working moving forward, because what is clear is that there's an enormous amount to achieve it in the borough, not least the schemes that are on the table currently, but in the future. So we need to look very carefully how we attain that. I don't for 1 minute want to make any cuts or any savings in regeneration or in economic development. I don't think that's prudent, and I don't think it would be supported politically either. But of course, we will have to make savings in future years, and we'll have to work very hard to ensure that they don't impact on quality delivery and the economic development agenda. Thank you, Councillor. I hope that helps to answer some of that question.
Thank you for that, Jean. I'm assuming the Cabinet Member, Councillor Stuart Baldwin, wants to come in. He's put his camera on.
Thank you, Chair. You're doing a very good job of looking like a ventriloquist to me today, because you're managing to speak and your lips are not moving because your screen is freezing all the time. And it's just to support some of the things that the Corporate Director has identified there. These are decisions. She used the word savings, and I just want to identify the fact that these are ongoing cuts that we've had to suffer. But with those cuts, if they continue going forward, we would end up with significant projects like Maesteg Town Hall not being on the table because it's a non-statutory service as part of our economic regeneration. We would end up with the likes of the old McDonald's building within Bridgend Town Centre that was transformed thanks to Transforming Towns funding, that is now providing homes for 10 people, as well as a restaurant in the town centre that on Saturday was absolutely ram-packed and bringing people into our town centre to be able to spend. We would end up with the levelling up bid not being able to be developed. That could potentially deliver the closure of the level crossing and the Penpress Bridge. It would also end up with issues in Porthcawl, like the flood defences and other aspects around Salt Lake Car Park not being delivered because they are technically non-statutory services. And I think this is some of the problems when we talk about statutory and non-statutory provision, because the things that are necessarily or that aren't statutory are the ones that impact just as massively on members of the public and residents, and they see these differences. So I think we just need to be really clear around the fact around statutory and non-statutory. And I thank Councillor Williams for his question, because it has given us the opportunity to be able to raise the level of these projects that are being delivered and the millions and millions of pounds that are being brought in, especially with the work of the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal and the employment programmes that we have just secured through what is a non-statutory provision. That is investing in people in our communities and helping them back into employment. So it's great to be able to highlight those projects, as Janine has already done and raised around the funding. These are non-statutory provision, but they're not exactly a provision that we could do without. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Baldwin. Yes, in education we always on that scrutiny, we always talk about statutory, non-statutory, and quasi-statutory, because things that might not be statutory but are most needed as well. Councillor Alex Williams, you want to come back?
Yes, Chair, and I thank the Corporate Director and the Cabinet Member for outlining such important programmes which are discretionary, and I fully understand the importance of regeneration and economic development to develop the well-being priorities of our communities. I suppose, though, and I'm going to be deliberately provocative, as you know I always am, and to say that, as I mentioned previously, local government is being asked to do more and more, and we are here today to discuss the midterm financial strategy, what is important going forward. And all I question is that, given the additional regulatory and legislative obligations which are being put on local government, should these very laudable aims and objectives, such as regeneration and economic development, sit with another level of government? So, what I'm saying to you, perhaps as cabinet members, and maybe the leader would like to comment as well, is that has there been any pushback on potentially receiving additional funding from Welsh Government to deliver these services rather than relying on our settlement? Because there are competing priorities all of the time. And should we be focusing on doing what we should be doing to the best of our ability and doing it well and being the best in Wales, rather than perhaps focusing on areas which are discretionary? And I know that this is a difficult balance to strike because of the merits of the discretionary programmes which you've mentioned. But clearly what cabinet members will be saying to us as a committee, and when we provide recommendations to the cabinet for consideration, is, well, where are you going to find the savings then, guys? You want to try and protect this and protect that. Where are you going to find these savings? And it's absolutely a correct question to ask. So, if you want to protect strategic regeneration, if you want to protect tourism, etc., then where are you going to find the money from? I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps the areas where we need to focus on, regrettably, are the discretionary services which I've mentioned.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Right, as you can imagine, quite a few people have got their hands up now, so I am going to try and get round everyone. We'll go Councillor Baldwin first, and then we'll go Janine, Mark, and then the leader. So, Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the simple answer is we don't rely on our settlement when it comes to these non-statutory provisions, because a lot of the funding that is secured is either through Welsh Government, through town centre heritage, through lottery, through a variety of other funding. So these aren't settlement. This isn't work that is dealt with through our settlement. Elements of the settlement facilitate the projects because of match funding, but obviously the Levelling Up Fund and other projects that are delivered come through external funding sources. So we don't need to rely on our settlement to deliver these projects. We do need to rely on our settlement to support them through elements of match funding, although some of them are 100% match fund with certain aspects. But your question is provocative, Councillor Williams, but not misplaced in any way, shape or form. The question is difficult to answer. Where are we going to rely on future cuts? Because at the end of the day, we are now probably into our 11th or 12th year of austerity and ongoing cuts to local government that we have been lucky to have been sheltered from this year because of Welsh Government. But unfortunately, as we've seen funding cut because of European funding and the unclear future when it comes to the Shared Prosperity Fund, we are looking at alternatives and partnerships to be able to secure these external funding regimes to continue to do what some people might describe as nice to do projects, but if we don't do these nice to do projects, we don't get people back into employment, and we end up with landmark buildings within our town centres that are owned within the private sector, staying in a condition that doesn't suit our town and communities. So you're right to ask it. It is a difficult question, and that is the difficult balancing act. This is my first cabinet, my first time in cabinet of setting and helping to set this budget, and there are plenty of other cabinet members that have been there longer that will answer and give you a more thorough answer in relation to it, Councillor Williams. But these are the challenges that we go through on a daily basis when we're being asked to make sure that we don't cut provision, that we have a reduced settlement, maybe not this year. We have continued pressures, and we're also asked around making sure that we don't hike up council tax to be able to cover those. So yeah, I totally accept and totally agree with your question. It's difficult for us to be able to ascertain where it is we would go for in future cuts.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldwin. I'm going to break my own queue now, and I'm going to bring in Councillor Smith because he seems to have a very urgent point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chair. I think it's appropriate that I come in after Stuart, because I'm the other cabinet member with some responsibilities for regeneration. That was the issue raised, and I do have to leave in a minute, as I explained at the start of the meeting. But yeah, I just want to re-echo what Stuart said about the partnership arrangements that we have for regeneration projects. I don't really recognise the phrase that Councillor Alex Williams used about pushing back to Welsh Government on these projects, because all of these projects are done in direct partnership with partners, including the Welsh Government, whether we're talking about regeneration or 21st century schools. Other partnerships, of course, include the social landlords in projects such as the one in Norton Street, Bridgend. Others involve town and community councils, and others still involve the European Commission, as a matter of fact. So partnership working is what it's all about. And one of the huge justifications for there being a regeneration team is the multiplier effect that they produce. So we invest some thousands, and the return is measured in millions. And you can apply that to big projects and little projects alike. You know, small projects, relatively small projects to do with community centres and playing fields, and massive projects to do with, I don't know, a 4.5-star hotel at Porthcawl or a 20th century school. I think Councillor Williams has done us a favour by reminding us that the future is uncertain. Austerity hasn't ended. We are still £62 million down on the budget over the last few years, and that £62 million isn't going to be repaid. So we've still got capacity problems as a result of that. We're having to do more with fewer resources. So we need to bear that in mind. But all the ambitions, all the proposed ambitions that the Cabinet have put forward for the MTFS are all costed. And they're all costed this time round against a proposed freeze in the council tax. If anyone wants to alter that 0% up or down, then they need to show exactly where that money is going to go, or where that money is going to come from. Everything needs to be costed, Councillor Williams.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Right, I am going to go back to my list, and Janine, do you want to come back in?
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. I think to go back to Councillor Williams' point, if I may, to answer, are some things done better regionally? And I think the simple answer is there's a place for both. There's both a place for regional decisions and there's a place for local decisions as well. Now, we currently have the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal. We work regionally on an awful lot of initiatives in Bridgend, but we are moving to a corporate joint committee structure. And in that corporate joint committee structure, there will be regional governance on strategic planning, on strategic transportation, and both of those make obvious sense, don't they? And there will also be regional governance surrounding economic development. Now, what we're currently doing is we're looking at what decisions are best placed at a regional level and what decisions are best placed in local government, local decisions for local people. And it's clear there is a real role for both. If we take, for example, some of the economic development we're doing at a more regional level, currently with CCR, we're looking at the Metro Plus programme to improve transportation across the region and movement. And Bridgend has a key part in that. We have over £3 million currently awarded to us, and we're working on two very, very significant schemes currently with that funding. The first is the Metro facility down in Porthcawl, one of the first big regional and significant transport initiatives we're doing on that Salt Lake area to connect Porthcawl back into Bridgend and the hinterland. And the second bit of work that we're doing is the feasibility study for the Penbrisk Bridge project, the multi-million pound project that we're applying to the Levelling Up Fund. We're doing the feasibility work funded via Metro Plus. So Metro has enabled us and working regionally to do that work. There's an awful lot of work going on currently as well on ULEV charging, ultra low emission vehicle charging with the City Deal. Again, across the region, they're putting in some infrastructure into public car parks. I think our share of the funding is around circa £300,000, as well as Bridgend. We're using £800,000 of grant funding to put the ULEV agenda into Bridgend. Another benefit of economic development for working regionally is the Housing Viability Gap Fund that the region have, and we've been able successfully to draw down £3.5 million of grant funding to work on the Awenny Road site in Maesteg, and that's to bring that site that has been blighted unfortunately by its industrial past back into a position where we can develop housing on there, an employment hub, look at doing a transport interchange for Awenny Road and for the people of Maesteg, be able to use that railway station to come in and out of the area. So regionally, tremendous amount of benefit. But then locally, economic development, very, very important role, and we wouldn't want to give that up, because we need to look at what schemes that have a real direct local benefit. We've talked about schemes that have regional benefit. We have to look at those that had the real benefit for ourselves. For instance, some of the work we're doing in Porthcawl with Cosy Corner redevelopment, we've managed to lever money from Welsh Government Tourism to redevelop the Cosy Corner piece. We've talked about transforming towns and how important that money is for looking at improving the properties in our town centres, work there. Again, we mustn't forget how important the 2030 agenda is for us as a council. We must get to a net zero carbon position across our council services, including transportation, land use, planning and procurement by the 1st of April 2030. It's mandated. So a lot of grant work and economic work is done on things like the Bridgend district heat network, and we're also doing refitting some of our buildings. And another tremendously important initiative is the movement of Bridgend College, bringing them into a brand new campus in the middle of Bridgend Town Centre. Now we've assisted some funding with Welsh Government, but that's an instrumental part of driving footfall and regenerating our local centres. So when we talk about are some of these things better done regionally, we need to do both. We need to do both approaches. We need to continue to work regionally to ensure we have that partnership and economic development at that regional level and that the benefits benefit us all. But we must still have that really local intelligence and drive locally the regeneration that we know will impact in our local communities. So I hope that has assisted you with some of that understanding, Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janine, for that. Right, I'm going to go to the Chief Exec because he's had his hand up for a while now, and I'm sure his arm's hurting. So, Chief Exec.
I'll be brief, Chair, and hopefully the dog won't join in. A lot of the points have been made, so I won't repeat what's going on, but I suppose just the one point I'd make to Councillor Williams, and I know he'll recognise this, is that all members would expect us to operate as one council. And one of the challenges, I think, when you simply talk about discretionary or statutory services, is many of our discretionary services across the council, but actually in this directorate as well, actually contribute towards making more effective our statutory services. So if you take, for example, our employability service, which is designed to help and assist people to get back into work, that clearly has a direct impact on things like council tax reduction, benefits, etc. So all I would say is that I think it's a more nuanced and sophisticated sort of look at things rather than simply saying we'll deliver statutory and not discretionary, because otherwise it becomes a false economy. And I think just worth making that point, because I think it's there are going to be some difficult decisions moving forward, but they need to be considered on the basis of how that contributes overall towards the council's objectives, not just on whether they are on their own in isolation, statutory or discretionary. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief Exec. I'm going to bring the leader in now, who's also going to make a very brief point, I'm sure.
Well, I'll try to, Chair. I think most of the points have been made. I think it's an interesting and fair question from Councillor Williams, but increasingly that black and white contrast between discretionary and statutory services, if there ever was that contrast, has gone. So as others have spoken, I've been struggling to think of a regeneration project that doesn't have a direct and specific statutory role. So my town hall is a regeneration project. It's a regeneration project on a listed building that we own, so we have a very clear statutory responsibility there. It will deliver on a new library. For my stake, we have a statutory duty around library provision. If we're talking about the very exciting proposals for a new bridge over the railway in Pencoed, that is regeneration, but clearly it's also a transport project. We have very well-defined duties and responsibilities, statutory responsibilities and duties on transport. And Councillor Baldwin has referenced the many other town centre projects that we have underway, regeneration projects that deliver new homes to people. We have a statutory duty as the Strategic Housing Authority to deliver new homes in partnership with our registered social landlords. And what I would also say is just the growing importance of the Cardiff Capital region, and I am comfortable with that. I'm supportive of that because the Corporate Director for Communities has referenced 2 projects, for example, that simply would not have happened if it was not for Cardiff Capital Region. So that's the progress on the Wenny Road site in my stake and the Metrolink in Porthcawl. So thank you for allowing me to come in, Chair.
No worries, thank you, Lee. Councillor Alex Williams, do you want to come back on anything that's been said, or can I go to
No, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to give all colleagues the opportunity to make those points. So I think on the public record. So I think that's been really helpful. Thank you for your comprehensive responses, everyone.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Councillor Clark, you've waited really patiently. Do you want to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And can I go back to the subject of CAT that we started off the meeting with?
Yeah, go on.
Is that okay?
Yeah, well.
I just wanted to ask, basically, what is happening as far as those clubs and sports facilities that didn't or haven't shown an interest in the CAT process so far, and as far as the council's input regarding financial resources, basically. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Leader, did you want to come back on that, or is your legacy hand?
No, I wanted to come in very quickly, just to say that we've made a commitment that we will bring a report to a committee or forum of the council, a full and comprehensive report on the community asset transfer process, because there's a lot of interest from members.
we were planning to take a report to the Town and Community Council Forum. However, that agenda became very packed, but we will look to see where else we can bring it. I think it's probably best placed at cabinet level, so we'll look to do that quite quickly, and hopefully that will answer many of the questions that are clearly there from members about the process. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that, Leader. Okay, so, right, I'm going to move on to the first half of Councillor Alex Williams' question now. We were talking about the budget in its form now. And I'm also then going to bring in Councillor John Spanswick on table 6, which I believe link in there. So Councillor John Spanswick, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. I can find table 6 now. I think it's on page
35.
35, yeah. Page 35. It's table 6 on page 35. And it's not so much a comment, but it's an ongoing dog with the bone scenario of the last 10 years regards to the sort of budget increases and the situation across the council. And on table 6, it shows education and family support, an increase of approximately 4%. Social services and wellbeing, this is year on year, increases approximately 5%. Yet communities, an increase of around 2%. Now, I understand we talked at the beginning of the meeting about the pressures with national insurance and pay rises. I'm not sure if that is built into the directorate budgets or in more of a corporate budget, but it's just the ongoing year-on-year picture that's painted of the community's budget never quite gets the same sort of increases and treatment as other directorates. I've gone on this for year after year and year, and we talk about the importance of a public realm and our visible services, and I welcome the capital investment that's going into public realm. That's great. We need that capital investment. We also need the revenue money for the maintenance of those services, the areas we invest in. So it's the maintenance, but the revenue maintenance budget, and I unfortunately see yet again the community's budget not increasing in line with other parts of the council, and it again questions the one council approach.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanswick. Councillor Sturman, you had a supplementary comment on this. Do you want to make that now then before we go to officers?
Yes, I did. I really want to support what John is saying. It seems to me that the community's budget is the one that is, if you like, the most forward-facing. It's the one that residents see when the hedges don't get cut and the pavements don't get kept and all this sort of thing. John is perfectly right in what he's saying, and I would like an answer similar to him. I'm sorry about my dog barking in the background, as to why it's not getting an increase in line with some of the other budgets. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. Now, do any officers want to come in on this? Karis or Janine? Looking at it.
I can certainly give some information from a budget perspective, Chair, if that would help. I think it goes back to something I've already said, that when the settlement came through, there were certain assumptions made by Welsh Government with regards to what the council would fund from within the additional funding that's come forward. And as I said, there's a strong requirement on, well, it's a requirement on us to fund the national, the real living wage going forward. That's a significant increase in the budget. Which is showing on council-wide services as opposed to individual services. There's also requirements in there in relation to meeting some of the legislative requirements around things like additional learning needs, and also in relation to supporting social services going forward. I think it comes down again to having to meet some of those requirements, and therefore they take a first pull on some of the funding that is available, and as a result there are issues, particular money in there for teachers' pay, which again we have no discretion really as to where we place that. We're required to ensure that we meet the teachers' pay award, which means that the money is not shown against this particular directorate. And then I suppose all I could say is it comes back to what some of the comments that have already been made with regards to having to make difficult decisions with regards to priorities going forward within the budget envelope that's available.
Thank you for that, Karis. Does any other officers or cabinet members want to come in now before I go back to members? Jean.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Maybe it's useful as the director, a corporate director, to add some narrative as well. We have to set budget corporately. It is difficult because the community's budget hasn't increased year on year for some time. It's in, we have taken a large amount of savings from the directorate, and we are frontline services. However, we are a corporate management board, we are one council, so we have to view our budget in that way. We have to look at what the priorities are, and as Caris has outlined, some of the settlement figure that came through was earmarked for specific functions. What I will say, though, is that the budget that I have received, albeit it doesn't look like a very large uplift, there are a couple of things in there that we're comfortable with. We've had a particular pressure in communities was the increase in waste disposal costs because of increase in tonnage, and that was a pressure of 387,000 that we were finding it very difficult to deal with in communities, and that's been awarded in my budget. We've had a payment for national insurance uplift, and we've also had monies in from Welsh Government to make payments against the flood defence scheme in Porthcawl. That's a £6 million scheme, and Welsh Government assist us in the revenue to pay for that work. So those are the payments I've had, and that's why my budget has increased. I still have some savings to make, but as far as we stand, what the Corporate Management Board and the Cabinet have done is set budgets corporately, Chair, and look across the priorities of the directorate. So it's a difficult position for us all. I don't think it's a position that we would want to be in. It's a difficult position for us all, but we have to work together as one council here as we move forward. So I hope that clarifies some of it.
Thank you for that, Janine. Did any member want to come back on that with any supplementaries? Just raise your hand. The leader wasn't one of the members I was thinking, but go on.
Just that wider point around many of these services, these pressures are driven by specific service pressures or statutory requirements. So, for example, we have a new statutory requirement under the Additional Learning Needs Educational Act 2018 that we have to meet. We have a number of requirements around support for children with additional learning needs due to an increase in the number of children with those needs locally, and we have to meet those needs. And there's a number of examples of budget pressures here that are driven by the need, the recognised need that has been experienced across Wales for an increase in services and service budgets, and that's what's been addressed in the budget. And one of the biggest pressures actually is around the need to pay at least the real living wage, and of course social care is our biggest service in terms of the number of people that are working in the sector that are paid near or at that rate, and there's a specific commitment from Welsh Government around the real living wage, which we're obviously very pleased to be implementing in Bridgend. We've taken a lead on that locally, but it's the biggest example actually of a specific pressure that we have that is being funded by Welsh Government, but it is a commitment we have to honour because it's Welsh Government policy and it's our policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Leader. Okie doke. I'm not seeing any further members coming in, so I will leave that part of questioning. Does anyone else have any questions on the body of the report before I move on to Appendix A, which is pressures? Give me a sec. No, fabulous. Right then, so we'll move on to Appendix A, which is the budget pressures for the forthcoming year. And on Com 1, I have Councillor John Spanswick.
Not me again, just a general question. It's on the growth. I'm trying to find the sheet now. Yeah, Com 1, and it also applies to Com 2 as well, and possibly Com 3. It's more about trying to understand what's within the contract and how what sort of flexibility may be in the initial contract, but the tonnages when it comes to the blue bags, the waste, and how has that been calculated and monitored to know that I mean, we don't know where we are year forward. A lot of it is saying it's relating to the pandemic and where we've been, and accept that. Hopefully we're in a better place this year. So we're not sure, you know, those tonnages could come down the next year, but it's how have they been calculated and how it's been monitored and arrived at the figure, basically. How have we got to that stage? And what's the projection moving forward?
Ginny?
Oh, yes, sorry, Chair. You've gone blank then, so yes, thank you, Councillor Spanswick. It's a really interesting question, actually. What we've experienced over the pandemic is a number of things, really. We have seen people working from home. We've seen people's shopping habits change. And as a result, and more people out in open space as well. And as a result, what we've seen is increase in tonnage across these three pieces here, Com 1, Com 2 and Com 3. So when you put them together, it's an increase in tonnage of kitchen waste, because people are working from home and eating, whereas they would be out at work, and disposing of items they're at home. We've also seen blue bag waste, which is residual waste. It's waste that can't be recycled. That's increased. And we've also seen we collect street waste now and try and recycle that as much as we can because of our ever-reaching Welsh Government targets. But we're also seeing a lot more waste now in bins, in parks, for instance, at beauty spots where people are out and about us. So there is no doubt that people's habits have changed during the pandemic. The other thing we've got to recognise as well is the population of Bridgend is increasing year on year. We're building new homes, people are moving into the borough, the population is driving change. So we get increased tonnage from the population, also from the change in habits. So throughout the whole year, literally the amount of tonnage that we're taking to waste, and we measure tonnage, has increased month on month on month. Now, it isn't all bad news. It's bad news in the form that, well, not bad news, it's difficult in the way that it is increasing costs. But what has also been the upshot here is people are recycling more as a result. Now we have a statutory recycling target of 64%. The borough has been around about 68% for some time now, but over the last quarter in particular, with increased tonnage and collecting street waste for recycling, we've been well above 70% sustained. Now we know that Welsh Government, their target for recycling will increase to 70+% in the future. So whilst we have an increase in tonnage, we are also seeing an associated increase in recycling too. Now, whether this will drop in the future, whether people will return to work in a blended model, we may see less tonnage. That is something I'm afraid we'll have to see when, as we move forward. We know that lots of people are enjoying the work-life balance that working from home gives them. We know that people are really enjoying being out and about, enjoying the facilities that we have in the borough, the beautiful parks and open spaces. They're continuing to enjoy them since the pandemic. So what we need to do is to monitor this month on month. Currently, we have that pressure on the waste tonnage. It has increased throughout the pandemic. It is settling now at the position that we've identified as a pressure, and we need to monitor this going forward. But we know exactly why these things are happening, and we know exactly how much the tonnage is. It's not an estimate. We know what the tonnages are that are being collected, because everything is reported, has to be reported as part of our recycling targets for Welsh Government. So I think this is a, dare I say, some of it will be a change that won't be reversed, but some of it, Councillor Spanswick, is to keep a watching brief on the exact quantum of tonnage going forward.
Thank you for that, Jean. I'm going to bring in Councillor Lynn Walters now on when the food waste goes to Stormy Down. Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Janine, for that update. The one question I have really on the food waste pressure is that the food waste generates the plants at Stormy Down. Is there anything in the contract that if we're generating more there, are we able to offset that with any of our costs from Kia? Because there is more electricity being developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. That's a really interesting question, actually, and that's something, if you don't mind, I'll take away and ask that question. We are very keen to keep using those anaerobic digesters up at Stormy Down. Of course, it's an incredibly important part of our 2030 agenda, recycling and getting to net zero carbon. What we are doing is one of the BREP recommendations, you may recall, I think it was BREP recommendation 12 actually, was to look at the food waste bags that we use up at Stormy Down, and whether we could change the mechanism for collecting food waste to make some savings on the bags there, and that may offset some of the cost of the tonnage. But I will make that query and come back to you, if I may, about the electricity piece, although I'm not sure how easy that is to measure, but I will ask that question because I think it's a very interesting one, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Walters, you want to come back?
If I may do, simply because Janine has raised about the bags, I wasn't going to do that until later on with the pressures. But a few years ago, I went up to Stormy Down and spoke and had a site visit. They hate our green bags because it clogs up their machinery. We have the cost of actually delivering them to the to our residents. Residents don't like them because they fall apart because they are so biodegradable. Stormy Down would prefer us to use plastic bags or even paper. So there is so much plastic that is already in the food production with bread, with lots of different things. And if there's a cost of actually finding better biodegradable bags, wouldn't it be better to look at the Stormy Down processing plant again? Because I think they process most of the food waste for South Wales, not just for Bridgend. And if they would prefer us to use plastic bags, it's more of a communications thing. I understand why we want to be a very green council. However, those food bags that are already in everybody's homes are already having to be disposed of. And if there's a very good communications exercise, that could change this red pressure to green. And it seems to me a relatively easy win. Thank you.
As you can imagine, Jean, there are a few questions on that later on, but if you want to answer Councillor Walters' point,
no problem at
we'll
all. Yes, yeah, I'm quite happy to answer Councillor Walters' question now. No, absolutely. One of the savings that we're making this year, one of the budget reductions, is to save 35,000 to change those waste bags from biodegradable to another source, whether it be paper, whether it be, dare I say, plastic. Because what happens currently, exactly as you suggested, Councillor Walters, when those bags get up to Stormy Down, they have to remove the food from those bags, those biodegradable bags, because the anaerobic digester works quicker than the bags degrade. So it does cause issues with the machine. So they do have to empty them out, and those bags have a cost associated. So one of the savings this year is definitely to remove those biodegradable bags from the system, to source another form of bag that'll be from April onwards, and we're doing that in consultation with the folks up at Stormy Down to check that we're using in the most efficient way, really, and to work with other authorities to see what they do. Now, there has been some suggestions, why do we have bags at all? Why can't we just have food in the caddy and then the food gets disposed of without a bag? But and the difficulty we have there, I'm afraid, is that what happens when you remove bags completely from food waste is the recycling of food drops dramatically, and they've experienced that in other local authorities. So what we need to find is a more effective way of collecting that food waste. It certainly won't be in the biodegradable bags we're currently using, because they are causing issues. But we're working with the company up at Stormy Down now to identify that. But we do have a saving of 35,000 predicated on it into the following year, and that's something the team are working on now. I'll be able to come back and report on that when we find a solution that works for us all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. No worries. Thank you for that, Janine. Thank you for that, Councillor Walters. We will return to, but it's not along the same lines as Councillor Walters. There are other questions, but we'll return to that when we do budget reductions later on in the meeting. I will move on now, unless there's any more questions on COM 1 to COM 2, which is the blue bag waste. Sorry. And Councillor Nora Clark, you had a question about the tonnage.
Thank you, Chair. I would be interested to know, excuse me, the increase in the kitchen waste in tonnage and the blue bag waste. I think what I did say previously was that obviously we've got a limit on how many blue bags we can put out, and that is 2, and I don't think that is altered. So you know, how are people putting out more bags than 2? You know, I'm out and about on a Friday down here in Porthcawl, and I've got to be honest, I'm not seeing people putting out extra bags more than 2. In fact, I find that residents seem to think that they must put out 2 bags, and usually they're just not full. They're half full, hardly anything in them, but they seem to think I must put out 2 and do so. More often than not, I only put out 1 myself, and I'm just wondering, you know, how this has increased, and I'd be interested to know by what tonnage it has increased. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Janine?
Oh, thank you, Councillor Clark. Yeah, that absolutely. Let me see if I can try and explain. So pre-pandemic, people were out, a significant amount of people in the borough were out at work in the day, obviously, and children were in school, etc. So the amount of residual waste, because that's what goes into those blue bags, is waste that can't be recycled, was at a limit of 2 bags. That was the limit you could pop out outside the house. Now, as you rightly said, not everybody displayed 2 bags because people didn't have that amount of residual waste, and because Bridgend is very, very successful with its recycling regime. As I've said, we've hit over 70% target, so we don't get a great deal of residual waste. But now the difference is more people now live in the borough, so there are more houses displaying blue bags of waste. So the first thing is the uplift in population that we've had from all the new housing that's been developed. That's number 1. And then number 2 is that people are now at home more. So maybe in the past they may have presented 1 bag of blue waste, but now they're displaying 2. So it is a fact really of changing lifestyles and an increase in population. But what I think I'm really pleased to say is it isn't that people aren't recycling. We're doing very well with those targets. We're getting over 70% recycling. So what we are getting in those bags is residual waste. And it's just a case, I'm afraid, of people spending more time at home and also changing lifestyles and an increase in population. So I don't think it's that people necessarily want to present less. I just think they have more to present. I hope that does that answer the question, Councillor Walters. What I can do is, I don't know the exact tonnage increase now, but if you want to, I can get that from Jen Sparrow, who's our waste service manager, and I can send that to you supplementary to show the month-on-month increase during the pandemic of blue bag waste, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jane. You can send that on to the committee. We'll look, because I think that'll give us a better understanding of what this pressure actually is going forward. So thank you for that. Right, Councillor Keith Edwards, you had a comment on this.
Chair,
Nora, sorry,
oh, could I just come back in, Chair?
Of course you can, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks for that information, Janine. And yes, I would be interested in the tonnage uplift if that is possible. But you did mention that the increase, one reason was the uplift in population. I mean, wouldn't that have been included into the contract when the contract was initially taken out? That obviously in any county borough there's going to be an uplift in population due to houses and places being built.
Yes, absolutely, Councillor. There is an uplift in increase built into the contract, but I'm afraid Bridgend has exceeded the amount that's built into the contract. We have been building homes at a rate of knots in Bridgend. Our population has significantly increased since the contract was taken out. And I think moving forward for any new waste contracts in the future, what we need to recognise is, in particular, the areas that are in our LDP currently, the strategic housing sites. We've got 5 or 6 very large housing sites, and the impact that's going to have on services across the council in particular when we see the population increase. And I'm afraid it's not just on waste service collection, it will be on schools, on social services, on the roads and how we maintain those. As our borough grows, there are pressures right across the council to serve the increased population. So absolutely, there is an increase, but I'm afraid we have grown quicker than the increase that was in the provision. So we do, and also the pandemic has had a real marked impact on waste collection because of people spending more time at home. That's one of the most significant things. But again, let me please caveat that with, it's not all a bad news story, because we have had exceptionally good recycling rates for Bridgend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Janine. Did you want to come back, Councillor Clark?
No, that's fine. Thank you for that information, Janine.
No worries. Okie doke, then I will move on to Councillor Keith Edwards. You had a comment on this one. Do you still want to make it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. This has been discussed in scrutiny on various occasions. We are aware that it's a tonnage-based contract. The budget pressure has to be met. What it does do is flag up a very interesting scenario for the new contract or the way in which we manage waste going forward. We've been tied into contracts before. MREC is a classic. It's cost us a fortune over the years, and the new contract going forward will have to be scrutinised very carefully. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure we'll do that going forward and past the election for whoever the new council is. Okay, so I will move on to COM 3. Councillor Gary Thomas, you had a question on litter bins. Is he here? He had a phone call. I don't know if he's coming back.
Thank you, Chair.
There we are.
It's about the infrequency of the litter bins being emptied. At my area, they should be emptied on a Friday morning. But on a Saturday morning, I keep getting phone calls that the rubbish is on the floor, the bins have not been emptied. And I have sent many referrals in about this. And it's still happening. They're just not emptying on the day they're supposed to be, or if it's not on a Friday, it's on a Monday. but at the weekend I still keep getting your phone calls. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Janine, did you want to make a comment on that, or is it something you think that the councillor should take up with the cabinet member outside the meeting?
I'll quite happily speak to Councillor Thomas on that, because it's more of an issue around operational rather than the MTFS and budgets. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor. All right then. So unless anyone has any further questions, not seeing hands going up, so that's fine. We'll go on to Appendix B then, which is the planned reductions / cuts to services, and we'll go to Com 1, which is regeneration, and Councillor Lynn Walters. Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for all of the updates so far. But after the very long discussion we've already had about the importance of regeneration, I'm really concerned that the 299,000 is potentially being removed from the budget, and would like to understand what impact that is going to have on our regeneration projects. So if we remove this, if we remove this budget, which projects are at risk? All of them? Some of them? My screen's gone blank, so I hope you can still hear me. You've just come back, JP, thank you. So it's really just a case of what impact is that going to have on our regeneration projects, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Walters. I think what's important to note here is that in the current next year, we propose to remove 20,000 from that budget, but the following year is 279, which would remove all of the budget, and that's flagged as red, because I think at this stage it's not something that we would want to put forward as a budget reduction for all of those reasons you've suggested. Now, I don't think it'll impact on projects we have currently, the multitude of projects, the 53 million that we're delivering, because we've used that funding, the Strategic Regeneration Fund, to match fund already, or to use it to conduct feasibility studies. What it will curtail, if we did lose that funding, is schemes in the future, looking for funding in the future, because it's the only pot of money, dare I say, that we use specifically for that purpose. And most grant schemes are not fully funded. Very few grant schemes come 100%. The Welsh Government's Transforming Town is up to 70%. Some of the work that we do with other areas of Welsh Government grants go up to 90%, but there's always a match funding element. Now, sometimes what we can do is we can match fund with benefits in kind. So, for instance, if we are doing a piece of work on land, we can say, well, the value of the land is what Bridgend Council are putting forward, and we can use that value as the match. But that's not always possible. So it won't have an impact currently on the very large regeneration economic programme we have, but should we lose that money in the future, and it's something that I don't want to offer up as a saving if I'm truthful in the future, it will impact on our ability to conduct feasibility studies, etc. What we are also finding currently is some providers are now, because they understand the difficulty, giving you monies to conduct feasibility studies. So, for instance, we've just updated our local area energy plan for Bridgend, and in order to do that, we had a grant of 53,000, I think it was roughly 53,000 from Welsh Government to do that work. So what we are now finding is not only are they providing capital, but they are starting to understand that we're not resourced to put the funding bids and the feasibility in. So there is a little bit of a sea change as well in that respect. But I think what I would want to do as the director here and work with my cabinet member is to try and protect that funding going forward, because it does give us the ability to match fund, to do feasibility studies, and to literally make a real impact with grant funds for the borough. So I hope that provides some background information, Councillor.
May I come back? But thank you for that, Janine. May I come back, Chair? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Just the question then is, and it is helpful to know that the projects that we currently have are not at risk. However, things that we have talked about, so the Bridge End Regeneration Project, so that one, I don't believe we've actually started any feasibilities. So are we actually saying that the regeneration of Bridge End, so the Bridge End master plan, is potentially at risk? Because we have 25,000 for next year, or a reduction of 25,000 for next year. The year after, we're losing the rest of it, so the rest of that budget. So it would be really helpful to have a list of the projects that are definitely safe and the ones that are now at risk moving forward if we do have to lose this money, even taking into account the change of other suppliers sometimes providing us with feasibility money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walters. I think that's the difficulty associated with that is we're not really sure in the future what support will be available for us via either the CCR, Welsh Government, WLGA, for instance. So there is definitely a sea change in funding for sure. Now, the regeneration programme that we have, the capital programme that we have in front of us for 53 million is developed, is safe, and it's in train. So I'm not overly concerned about that at this point. The Bridge End regeneration and the master plan and some of the schemes in there, I think are fairly safe at this stage. And the reason why I say that is because we have a regeneration team that are working on those schemes with, for instance, let me give you an example. We're working with Bridge End College on moving, bringing their new building into Cheapside, and we've had money from Transforming Towns to acquire that police station and to drop it, and we're working with them on that. Bridge End College are funding some the architects' work, we're working alongside them, and Welsh Government are funding the build. We are looking to connect them into our district heat network, and that's a scheme, but that's done with existing staff resources. And a second example really is the railway station and improvements that we want to do to the railway station in Bridge End. And in particular, one of the BREP recommendations that came out is, could we look at a better integration of railway station, bus station, etc. Now, we've got a working team together of Network Rail, of Transport for Wales and ourselves looking at that currently. Now, that is not preventing that feasibility work going on currently. That work is going to continue. Where I think we are going to require some assistance is, should we in the future apply for funding to undertake that work and have to do a match fund for that. But again, that match fund wouldn't come from this SRF fund. The match fund for any large capital schemes like that would come from our council's capital programme. So what we'd have to do at an appropriate time in the future is apply to the capital programme for funding to match fund some of those larger schemes. So I don't think I don't want to lose that SRF fund for sure. I know there are replacement funds coming forward, such as Shared Prosperity Fund will come forward. I know we've got the region, we've got WLGA and Welsh Government that are going to help us in the main of feasibility. But I think we need to look very carefully at that pot. But what I would say in answer to your first question is, I'm not hugely concerned at this stage that any of our projects in train are at risk, and or, for instance, anything that's in the Bridge End master plan is at risk as it stands. Neither the work that we're doing at Porthcawl either. I think those things are built into our budgeting so far. So I think it what I could do though is for sure come back to scrutiny in the future and give you a comprehensive view of where regeneration is, where the schemes are, how they're being funded, because the Porthcawl scheme in particular, the way that some of those components are funded is from a multiple range of sources. So I think we're intending on reporting to March Cabinet about Porthcawl regeneration and the placemaking piece. So maybe this scrutiny would be happy to receive a report in the future about some of those funding mechanisms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Janine. I'm sure whomever is the chair of this committee going forward will happily have that report. Right, Councillor Walters, did you want to come back?
No, thank you very much, Janine, for that very full response. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. Right, Karis, you put your hand up, so I assume you want to come in on this point.
Yes, Chair, actually, it was just to support something that Janine has just said, and that is that there is a county-wide fund available year on year to fund corporate feasibility, and that's £250,000 year on year. As Janine said, there is demand on that, but obviously I guess it would come down to priorities then with regards to which schemes could be supported via that funding stream. But just to, I suppose, to reassure Councillor Walters that there is some other money available that could be used to do some of the work that she's outlining.
Thank you for that, Karis. Councillor John Spans, we're going to have you next on this proposal.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, on the proposal, which ideally I believe shouldn't even be there, full stop, this year and next. That previously been told that regeneration, the investment is like a 12-to-1 factor. For every pound we invest, we bring in 12. And I accept what Jean's saying, that the big chunk is next year, but that's the whole budget going. And we should be looking at more than just 1 year across all budgets. And I fear it shouldn't be there even now, because it's the message it sends out to the wider economy. The wider, the message it sends out is that agenda next year are not going to have, 23, 24, are not going to have that fund. So I believe it shouldn't be there, full stop now, because it's sending out the wrong message for the future.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanswick. I think there's more of a comment, and we'll discuss that further in when we do our recommendations. Councillor Alex Williams, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just as a rider to what Councillor Spanswick said, though, is if I'm going back to my earlier question, I'm not sure whether I missed the answer, but perhaps you can just briefly reiterate it. I think Karis mentioned in her opening remarks in presenting the report that due to the healthy budget settlement which the Welsh Government have awarded the Council this year of 9.2%, some of the budget reductions which were going to be considered by this directorate have either been scrapped or deferred to future years. Can you just remind me and outline exactly which budget reductions have been scrapped as a result of this welcome financial settlement by the Welsh Government? And, you know, as I mentioned previously, if Councillor Spanswick's suggestion is that we remove this budget reduction altogether because of the benefits which regeneration actually delivers the local authority, which has been reiterated by Councillor Baldwin, Councillor Smith and the leader in their previous remarks, then clearly it's incumbent upon us to actually find other areas to balance the budget. So it would be interesting to hear from both Karis and well, the cabinet members and corporate director about which other options were on the table previously before this this healthy settlement came forward.
Okay, we are right, Karis.
I was just going to say, and maybe it's an apology from me, Chair, in that I did say that as a result of the heavy settlement, of the better than anticipated settlement, we were able to reduce some of the savings that we were asking services to find in the coming financial year. My apologies come in that none of those savings were actually in relation to this committee, so they were in relation to education and social care and some vacancy factors that were in other directorates. So my apologies if I misdirected you, Councillor Williams. What I meant to say was that we've been able to reduce savings, but they weren't actually for this directorate.
Okay, thank you very much, Karis.
Thank you for that, Karis. I think that. But are you happy with that, Councillor Williams, or would you prefer we continue?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No worries, thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to go to Councillor Keith Edwards now. Councillor Edwards, you had a comment on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a comment. Regeneration is the jewel in the crown for this authority. We would be severely disadvantaged if we made this cut when competing for funding against other authorities who obviously would have their feasibility case in hand. I agree totally with John Spanswick. I cannot understand how this is even being proposed. Obviously, we will have our remarks to feedback, but at this point in time, where is the vision for Bridgend if we don't continue with regeneration? And this will severely impact on our ability to continue with regeneration across the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Edwards. I think that's a good, very good comment there. Leader, you want to come in? Your hand still up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to stress that there are effectively two proposals that have been made, and of course the comment and narrative is on two proposals, whereas there are in effect two separate proposals for consecutive years. So the much smaller reduction is proposed for next year, and as the corporate director has identified, there's a second cut, which obviously will be discussed and debated, I'm sure, in depth next year. This is an example of where we have to be careful when we're considering proposals that we do not consider them in isolation, because when we just look at budget reduction proposals, what we don't see is the core funding for the regeneration team, which is not being reduced at all. And there is a significant core strategic regeneration team that is continuing. The point has been made by the corporate director and by the Chief Officer for Finance and Performance and Change that there is, of course, a corporate fund that the regeneration team will be able to access going forward. And we've also heard from the corporate director of communities, and all colleagues have been updated on the large number of streams of funding that's been made available by UK government, Welsh government, Cardiff Capital Region that enables us to undertake feasibility work. So, for example, the feasibility work for the new bridge at Pencoed that has been funded with support from Cardiff Capital Region. So was the Metro link at Porthcawl. And we've been very successful at securing that funding, and I'm sure we will be at the future. So whilst I understand members' concerns, we need to consider this in the round, and we have every confidence that certainly next year this will not have an impact on our plans for regeneration because of the other funding sources that are available to us, and we'll continue to progress those schemes. We're very confident of that, Chair.
Thank you for that, Leader. Deputy, you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just make a very, very quick point that no, this COM1 and the red box there is under the indicative heading, and therefore is not set in stone. And you know, so when we understand a bit more about the impact, or that reduction can be reversed by an uplift in council tax. So, and that will be a political decision that we'll have to make in the future. So it has no bearing on this year's budget. It's for next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you for that intervention, Deputy Leader. Okay, unless anyone else has any other comments on oh, Councillor Williams does. There we are, Councillor Williams. Alex Williams, should say.
Thanks. Just as a rider to what the Deputy Leader said then, given the fact that there's a presumption within the MTFS and budget proposals that there would be a 4.5% increase in council tax going forward and in future years, then why is this particular reduction in the strategic regeneration fund even in the MTFS anyway? Because if it's going to be protected by a 4.5% or roughly 4.5% increase in council tax in future years, then it shouldn't be in the MTFS at all, should it?
Karis or the Deputy Leader, either of you? Yep.
No, that's it. These are all indicative figures. They're assumptions, and we haven't balanced next year's budget. So that is just purely an indicative assumption going forward. Next year's budget is not balanced at the moment.
Thank you for that. Councillor Williams, did you want to come back or?
Well, I don't have much assurance by that, because councillors are being asked to approve an MTFS then based on indicative figures. The values or the figures which has been inserted into this report on the MTFS presume, and I appreciate the fact that they are presumptions and it depends on the local government settlements which we receive from the Welsh Government, but nevertheless they do presume a 4.5% increase in council tax, and we are expected to approve an MTFS based on the figures in this report. This is what we're scrutinising at this point. So it can't be said now in this meeting by the cabinet member responsible for finance that this budget will definitely be protected if there's an uplift in council tax. So I don't have any assurance by that. So when we discuss our recommendations, and if judging by what Councillor Spanswick and Councillor Edwards have said, that they are opposed to this budget heading being removed altogether, then I don't see any assurance really in what the Deputy Leader has said with regards to protecting that budget, unless it is most definitely removed from the MTFS in its entirety.
If I very quickly, I'll draw the members' attention to the bottom line, and that's the reduction. So we currently have got a 5.619 million reduction shortfall. So you can easily take that 279 and add it to the 5619, and then it disappears, but it doesn't mean that we balance the budget. It's just that we have the indicative figures are there. That's what we got to find next year going forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Did you want to come back, Councillor Williams, or?
No, I think I've made my point, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on then, unless anyone else has any other comments. No, I'm not seeing hands going up. All right, then we will move to COM2, which is tourism. And Councillor Ros Sturman, you wanted to come in on value tourism. Councillor Sturman?
Sorry.
That's all right.
No, can I leave it for now and move forward and then maybe come in a bit later?
Oh, of course you can. No problem.
Thank you.
Councillor Nora Clark, you had a question on the strategy.
Yes, I think I was coming off Councillor Sturman's question, but let me see. I think what I wanted to say was I'd be quite concerned regarding a reduction here. I don't know how much Bridgend as a county borough is advertised. I mentioned earlier on that you stop off on the M4 at services, and if you pick up brochures and look through it, Bridgend isn't even mentioned in some of the brochures. So firstly, I'd like to ask how much are we advertised as a county borough, in what brochures or leaflets, or in fact sometimes there's not even any leaflets in some of the services when you stop off and go into information, tourist information, etc. centres as well. So you know, as I say, I am concerned because it does impact on the local economy, and exactly what it says there. If you haven't got people coming into the county borough of Bridgend, then they're not helping the local economy. And can I understand that that it's the Janine, the economic development team that you know, do they deal with tourism, or is there a separate little team that deals with that, or not? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Before I go to Janine, if you don't mind, Councillor Sturman, the two were interlinked. So, Councillor Sturman, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. You were right. It was after Nora's question, so I wanted to let her get in first. My question again revolves around tourism. We don't do enough within Bridgend Borough Council. Do we even have a tourism department is a very good question. And also, if we're not spending money promoting tourism, how do anybody visiting the area know what's happening? For example, within the valleys, we have some beautiful walking areas, beautiful riding areas, lovely for bikes, but we never ever promote it. I really feel tourism is so important. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sturman. Cabinet Member Councillor Baldwin, you want to come in?
I do, and this partly falls in mine, but also very much within Charles's portfolio as well. I think the answer simply to Councillor Sturman is no, we don't have a tourism department. I think it is the half-time responsibility of one officer now, compared to the fact that we used to have between 12 to 13 members of staff within our tourism section. Unfortunately, it comes back to the cuts that we have had to deal with, and the previous decisions that have been taken, probably even before 2017, Councillor Sturman. So no is the answer. We don't have a tourism team. We have half a tourism person, I believe, and I'm sure Janine will put me right or wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that I know the brief, that's where we're at. Cuts are the answer to it. And we don't have that element of tourism. No.
Can I come back in, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay. May I ask, are there any plans to reinstate any sort of tourism at all? Thank you.
I think the everything that we've been talking about today in relation to budgets and the proposed whether there be a proposed council tax increase or whether there be a proposed council tax reduction, depending on the settlement that we've had, all impact on those sorts of things. So to enable us to have a tourism department with the current settlement that we have been given by Welsh Government would ultimately require an increase in council tax to develop that tourism department. And just having people in the tourism department isn't sufficient. They do need a revenue resource to be able to promote other aspects and to look at some of the things that we were doing around golfing. The people that we've got now do a fantastic job with the resources that they've got. But unfortunately, if these decisions have been taken over the years, Councillor Sturman, and I'm sure it was before your time and my time where these decisions were taken. But it was one of those decisions where, rather than council tax escalating way above what is required and what residents would want, it becomes a fairly difficult balancing act. So do we want tourism, which we know will at some point have a multiplier effect and bring people into it, or do we want to push council tax up by 3% on top of what we would have had to have done to maintain some other services? So, and I'm sure the leader has indicated now, and he was here way before me, and he'll come back with those sorts of answers. But if we want it, then at some point we have to pay for it.
Yes,
Thank you for that.
sorry. I understand that, and thank you for making the point. It's just such a sad state of affairs, and I understand there's nothing we can do about it at the moment, but I just wanted to make the point. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you for that, Councillor Chairman. The leader, do you want to come in on the points that Councillor Baldwin was making there?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's important to recognise that there is a difference between supporting tourism and tourism marketing. So they're two different strands. So within the lifetime of this council, of course, we opened the new water sports centre at Porthcawl. That has been incredibly successful. A multi-million pound investment in Porthcawl in a new facility, a state-of-the-art facility that's been incredibly successful in helping to increase the number of tourists visiting Porthcawl. Councillor Sturman is right to flag the importance of our valleys as well. And only this year we completed major investment in Poxet Nature Reserve and Bringow Park through our involvement, and we are actually the host authority for the Valleys Regional Park. It wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for our support. And this year, the Bringow Park has recorded a record high number of visitors to that facility, and the facilities have never been better at Bringow Park because of our investment. What we have done in terms of the promotion of tourism is that we have shifted from having, over the years, from having tourist information centres staffed because of austerity, but also because of the shift to online platforms, and the way that a large majority of people now rely on the internet to access information about places that they want to visit. And we still have that platform that we support, Visit Bridgend, and I'm sure Janine can provide more information about the success of that platform and other initiatives that we continue to support tourism in Bridgend County Borough. And the most important figures and facts that we need to think about and look at is, are the number of tourists visiting Bridgend County Borough increasing? And is the amount of money they're spending in the local economy increasing year on year? And the answer to both those questions is yes. So we have a thriving tourism sector in Bridgend. There is more that we can do, and there is more that we're planning to do, whether that's more investment in our valleys, in facilities like My State Town Hall, or in potentially bringing a new hotel to Porthcawl. They're plans that are there, and I know they're supported by all members, but I think it's really, really important that we differentiate support for tourism to support for tourism marketing, and also recognise that that has changed beyond all recognition compared to where it was just 10 years ago, and been very much based on staffed sites. Thanks, Chair. I hope that's helpful by way of an explanation, and I'm sure Janine can provide further information as the Corporate Director for Communities outside of this meeting about how we support tourism. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure we'll be asking for some in our recommendations. Okay, Councillor Clark, you've taken your hand down, so I'm assuming you're okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, fabulous. Thank you for that. So we're going to move on then to COM 3, unless anyone has anything else on COM 2. Fabulous. All right, so COM 3 then is household waste food bags. Now, Councillor Lynn Walters has already asked her question on that. So, Councillor Spanswick, you had a question on why it's still red.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's we've discussed it previously. but it is red, and just wondering why. No, it's not easy, but why is it so difficult perhaps to change the bags and get that in place for April? Because we've been aware of this a while, so just wondering why it's still red, I suppose.
Hello, Councillor Spanswick. I'm happy to answer that. It probably is more amber, dare I say now, because what we have realised is we need to change the bags. We've looked at a number of options, and we're currently working with the colleagues up at Stormy Down to select what would be the most appropriate to use going forward and to secure that saving. Now, because we haven't chosen the exact bag and the route and not ordered them, that's why it's red. But I think that will shortly change colour, because we are intending to change that regime in order to get a full effect on that saving. That 35,000 is on a full year saving on changing the bags. So just to give a bit of background to that, I think it's achievable in year, and it's a case of us just working through with the providers and ensuring that we're comfortable with the decisions we make before we change those bags over.
Okay, doke. Thanks, Janine.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Councillor Spencer. Councillor Clark, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, you know, are they leaning towards a preferred bag? You know, I mean, we're talking about paper, we're talking about plastic, but I mean, you know, if I am recycling, say something like I've got leftover gravy, or something has gone off in a jar and it's a sauce or something like that, I will put that into my recycling. But I mean, you know, if we went for paper, that's something that you couldn't do, because obviously, you know, you pull your bag out of your bin and it would just fall apart. So is there a preferred bag that we seem to be going for?
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Jean?
Yeah, Councillor Clark, no, I don't have that currently with me, but what I would say is the practice that we encourage is to remove excess liquid from that food waste before you empty it into the bags, because obviously the more liquid waste is in the bag, the quicker the waste biodegrades. So you would ideally drain some of that food waste, and that can go down the sink. But you would have to be very careful, because if you did put you understand, if you do put water waste into those bags, they will start to biodegrade immediately. So you are correct. So the practice that's encouraged is to remove as much fluid from that food waste. But we haven't chosen a preferred bag yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. Okay, unless anyone has anything else on COM 3, we'll move on to COM 4. Councillor Clark, your hand's still up. There we are. Like, see, fabulous. COM 4, then, I have a question. So COM 4, it's obviously about the corporate landlord. Are we putting too much pressure on a service that we know already is struggling in some areas? Is it too much work we're putting on corporate landlord? Can they continue to do it if we're going to keep putting more giving them more and more responsibilities? Thank you, Janine.
Yeah, it's a very valid question, Chair, because we know that we have a very high vacancy rate in corporate landlord currently in the professional and specialist services. But we've worked with Corporate Management Board and our HR colleagues now to have a plan in place to recruit that service and to bring in, dare I say, temporary support for that service. I think what's more important is, yes, it will put additional pressure on the service, but we're hoping to resolve that. But if we look at the long-term picture here, we've had Business in Focus assisting us with the enterprise centres in Bridgend, and dare I say, our vacancies have been high in some areas, and the team already currently fill industrial units and other units across the borough, so they would like to bring the 2 enterprise centres back into the fold to market them as they do with others, so it does secure that 20,000 saving. I think there's an awful lot of value in continuing with the Business in Focus contract. So that's the narrative behind that. But we do indeed need to resolve the current resource position in corporate landlord with some immediacy.
Thank you for that, Janine. Right now, does anyone else have any questions on Com 4? No, okie doke. We'll move then on to Com 5, which is Councillor Clark. You had a question on the Ravenscourt Vaccination Centre. Yes,
thank you, Chair. Firstly, I wanted to ask, are we having an income from the vaccination centre? And obviously, a number of years ago, there was talk about actually selling the building and moving the staff as we've done with Sunnyside, etc. I was just wondering basically where we are with that, and if we or if BCBC let out part of Ravenscourt, is that going to be a problem then if further down the line that you do want to sell it off? Well, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you for those, Councillor Clark. Janine?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Let me unpack some of that. Do we have an income from the building? The question is yes. The Health Board have been using it as a vaccination centre and have been paying us a rental income, and that covers the running of the facility, the utility costs, as well as a rental income. So we have been receiving that. Are we selling the building? I don't think there's any decision on that yet. And the reason I'm saying that is we are looking at the project for our new ways of working. And whilst we want to look at a blended model of working going forward, and I think at this stage, we're probably comfortable that we don't need Ravenscourt, but we won't be making that decision until we come to the end of the project, because I don't think that would be sensible at this stage, just in case there are parts of the building we want to retain for BCBC. Now, with regard to renting out wings commercially, there are a number of options for that building. If we did want to retain, for instance, we've got the MASH in there, the safeguarding hub, and we may want them to stay in there and they pay a rental income, and then we may want to commercially let 3 other wings if we move the existing council uses out of that building. Now, that doesn't preclude us from selling the building in the future. What we would do is you'd sell it as an investment with tenants already in the building. So it doesn't preclude that suggestion. Also, retaining the building allows us to have a rental income going forward, and that might be very useful for us in terms of using it for our budget situation, having that rental income. So there's a whole range of options on the table for us. Retaining it, disposing of it, getting a rental income from it. We're not making those decisions currently because we're looking at that project for future work. But it is something that once we get to the tail end of that future working arrangements project, we can take a view on the longer term future for Ravenscourt. So I hope that that answers the question, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, are you happy with those responses?
Yes, but I can see that Hugh wants to come in, so I might want to come in after that.
You might want to indeed. Leader.
Thank you for bringing me in, and Janine has explained how the building is very flexible actually. So the layout of the building was designed in such a way so that wings of the building can be used by different tenants, so we benefit from that. But what I wanted to stress was the importance of the vaccination programme, and as long as the Health Board needs that venue for the vaccination programme, and given the importance of the vaccination programme, then obviously we will continue to offer that building to Cwmtaf Morgana University Health Board. They have, and we worked very closely with the Health Board to identify alternative venues when we were looking at where we would site the vaccination centres for Bridgend before the vaccination programme even began, and it is very difficult to identify alternative vaccination centres. So that obviously is a major consideration for us as a local authority. And of course, we also use one of the wings, the ground floor wing nearest the bus station is used by the multi-agency safeguarding hub currently. So that's not just our staff, it's South Wales Police and Health Board staff as well, because that's a multi-agency team that we have based in the ground floor, Chair. But it is something we'll bring back to members, obviously before we make any final decisions. And there's a number of different options actually that Janine has touched upon for the future of Ravenscourt. Thank you, Chair. I hope that helps to answer Councillor Clark's question, because I think it's a good question.
Thank you for that, Leader. Councillor Clark, did you want to come back?
No, that's fine, thank you. Thank you for the information.
Thank you very much for that. Does any other member have any questions or comments on Com 5 before I move on to recommendations? I'm not seeing any hands going up. We've gone through all the appendices now, so I'm going to bid farewell to our Cabinet and officers. Now, you are more than welcome to stay, but I will understand if you have to leave. I won't take it personally. Thank you all for coming today. Obviously, members of the committee, please stay on so we can do recommendations. Thank you very much. No one seems to be going.
Thanks, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. They've all gone now, haven't they, Meryl?
Yes, Chair.
I'm still here, Chair, but if you don't mind, I'll just sit in the background and have a listen, if that's okay.
I'll let you this time. This is a public meeting.
Thank you.
So, Chair, recommendations then. Obviously, members have asked a comprehensive list of questions, gathered more information, and may be satisfied with some of those satisfied with some of the extra information, and may not wish to make recommendations. So perhaps if you were to go through in the same order the report and the recommendation and the appendices, and see one at a time if there are general recommendations or specific to the budget pressures and budget savings.
Yeah, thank you for that, Meryl. Right then, so members, we'll go through as Meryl's just suggested. We will go through as we went through in the meeting. Does anyone have any recommendations for the main body of the budget report today? I know we discussed things like CAT and budget pressures. Councillor Spanswick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If we could, just to put the recommendation to request what was said in the meeting, the written breakdown of the individual cost per CAT per site. Yeah. I think Janine got a bit middled with the cost for bowling greens and the number of bowling greens and seasonal grass cutters. It's just like, and it's been requested many days before. I don't know why it's so difficult to receive. Just a simple list of the CATs that have taken place to date and the cost of maintenance per site, which is supposedly the saving per site, even though it's not really savings, it's cuts, because ultimately the cost is passed on to a club or a community town or community council, but that's a separate issue. So just a list of CATs taking place to date with the maintenance cost per site to show the savings, separate to everything else.
I think we can definitely put that in. Thank you for that, Councillor Spanswick.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Yes, thank you. I know that Hugh mentioned that there's going to be a comprehensive report coming. I think he mentioned to Cabinet initially. I don't know whether we want to mention anything about that, because we really do need to see that report on well, I would be interested in what is happening to clubs and sports facilities that haven't shown an interest in the CAP process. You know, what is council deciding on going forward with those clubs? And are they sort of sticking to what was mentioned initially, was that they won't be funding them or part funding them, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's a report we can request. I think that's definitely something we should. Meryl, we can make roads with that.
I think, Chair, that was the leader was suggesting that report would be going to Cabinet for decision, but that obviously everybody will see that report. We only have the one meeting of SOC 3 left now before the pre-election period. So, you know, it's not, if it was to be a work programme item for this meeting, this committee, it would be in the new administration after the elections, because you only have one more meeting.
Okay. What are members' views on that then? Should we just put that on and then leave it for the next administration, or I'm not sure we'll be able to suggest it for our next meeting. I'm just thinking of weeks, and we usually give them 6, and we're definitely not 6 weeks.
I think, Chair, if you know, as long as it comes to, you know, to committee, albeit before May or after May. But Hugh did mention that it was, well, I got the impression it was imminent.
Yeah.
Go into Cabinet.
Should we then, what if members are happy? Should we then ask for it to come if it is written and it is ready? Because we can do pre-cabinet scrutiny, although I think it will be post-cabinet scrutiny. I think, well, going on the dates in my head. Should we see if we can get that report for the next meeting? And if we can't, we'll have something else, but we'll try and get that report. And if it can't come until after May, then so be it. But we'll see if we can get that report. If it's there, we should be able to have it.
Chair, I do think it's highly unlikely that our report is going to be ready to come to scrutiny by, I think the date of the meeting is in February, isn't it? It's the 16th of February.
Yeah.
The Cabinet member is still here. Perhaps he could advise us, because I don't think that's going to be in time.
Does that work for Councillor Baldwin?
I haven't seen any draft report in relation to that at this moment in time. So because obviously it would need to be approved to get to your February meeting, but it is already the end of January, and I haven't even seen a first sight of it. So I doubt it would be ready for your February meeting.
Okay, then that's fine then. We'll ask the question of when it will be ready, and we can go and put that on the forward work programme from there. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Obviously, if it did go to Cabinet at some time between now and May, obviously, you know, I would just be interested to see it. You know, what are the proposals, etc. The fact that it doesn't get to our committee is, well, neither here nor there, because we could pick it up and look at it from the Cabinet reports.
Thank you for that, Councillor Clark. All right. I think we'll put that on.
So just to clarify,
yes,
sorry, Chair, two points. Firstly, Councillor Spanswick's recommendation. Can we just check that the committee is in agreement with that? Yeah. So that we don't have, we've got consensus. And then Councillor Clark's, are we saying now then that you welcome the report, go into Cabinet and you look out for it, but you're not putting it on the work programme then, yeah? And is everybody in agreement with that?
Any dissension on we'll take the first one first. John Spanswick's CAT report that we see, the list of costs. Is anyone any dissension on that? Speak now. I think that's consensus, Mara.
Yes, Chair.
And then we'll take.
Just because of the public meeting, and we're making sure that the committee's recommendations. That's all. It's just
it's slightly difficult, isn't it, when these virtual meetings, because you can't see if anyone's nodding at you. And then we'll take Councillor Nora Clark's one about the report. We'll welcome the report when it comes.
I'm quite happy with that, Chair.
Happy with that. Any dissension? No. Okay, I think we'll take that as agreement there and consensus. Are there any other potential recommendations members would like to put forward on the body of the report? Councillor Alex Williams, you've got your hand up there.
Oh, not on the body of the report. Sorry, Chair.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Sorry, Chair, or any
now.
sort of general points made that weren't caught by any of the pressures or reductions.
Yeah.
Well, I do have one of those, but
yeah, let's go with that.
I don't know whether, Chair, that there seemed to be a degree of unanimity about what Councillor Spanswick and Councillor Edwards and I said about looking at the Strategic Regeneration Fund, and given the fact that the Cabinet Member for Regeneration was also supportive of the merits that Strategic Regeneration had, you know, and the wider economic benefits which that would bring the local authority. I don't know whether there should be a recommendation to Cabinet to try and re-examine the merits of keeping this budget heading. But I fully appreciate the fact that we as councillors would have to try and come up with a £299,000 saving from elsewhere to balance the budget. So I understand the pressures on Cabinet, but I think there was a degree of consensus, wasn't there, from committee members that perhaps Cabinet should relook at this budget heading going forward.
Yes, I agree with you, Councillor Williams. That was one I'd made note of myself. We should definitely be trying to protect regeneration and not look at any budget cuts for it. And as you say, we will have to find a replacement. But I think we can definitely make a recommendation that regeneration funding should be protected if you know, in a way, because I feel that was consensus in the group. Councillor Spanswick, you've got your hand up, and then Councillor Edwards.
Thanks, Chair. Still on the general body of the report, I pointed out about the disparity between education, social services, and the percentage increases year on year. And it's the comment then that, or the question I think Councillor Alex Williams asked Caris, say about what cuts were removed. And it's quite clear our response was that cuts were removed after the great settlement from Welsh Government from education and social services, but none of the proposed cuts were removed from the Communities Directorate, which I find that disappointing, that there was, after a really good settlement, there was some relaxation given of cuts to education and social services, but not the communities. And as a comment, but I think it's worth noting that it's disappointing that communities still has to suffer all the cuts after such a good settlement.
Yeah, I think that's a comment we can make into when we give our recommendations. So we can do that. I believe we can make that. We're disheartened to see that there are potential cuts to communities funding. But I'll go to Councillor Edwards first, and then we'll go back to Merrill.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Regarding regeneration, Chair, I think we should ask Cabinet whether the proposed cuts would set us at a disadvantage as opposed to other local authorities when funding is bid for if we don't have feasibility cases worked up.
Okay, thank you very much for that. All right, Merrill, so we've got two more recommendations there. One's more of a comment and one's more of a recommendation. So the Alex William, yeah, sorry, Merrill, go on.
Sorry, Chair, I was just going to say maybe there's some could be pulled together here. We've got Councillor Williams' comment about the asking the review the strategic regeneration and keeping the budget going, keeping that budget heading. Councillor Spanswick, the disappointment that community still has disparity of savings, whereas cuts were removed from others because of the 9.2% settlement. And Councillor Keith Edwards asking the Cabinet whether the proposed cuts disadvantage the council when funding is bid as opposed to other local authorities when funding is bid for. So do you want those as 3 separate points, or do you want to amalgamate them? And what I was going to suggest, Chair, is at the end of the meeting, I would bring these together and circulate them to the members present, and if you can come back to us quite quickly on the final wording.
Yeah, that's fine. Councillor Williams, Alex Williams.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with Councillor Spanswick's point about the public realm and communities being hit the hardest as a result of austerity over many, many years. Just a point, though, I suppose, which Cabinet will come back to us, and a point which the Chief Executive made in his remarks, is that I suppose we need to look at it as one council. And, you know, I know the Cabinet member's just observing, but I'm sure he would agree that as a result of the very welcome Welsh Government settlement, the local authority has been able to protect the schools budget from a 1% cut, which is what it would be, I think, without this generous settlement. So it's very difficult, isn't it, when you have competing priorities across the local authority, and no doubt Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee will consider this in more detail at the meeting on the 1st of February. But it is always the communities and the directorate and the public realm which suffer, but I suppose it's as a result of the very significant pressures in other directorates. So I suppose it's important to look at it from a one council approach as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Councillor Edwards, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to come back, or is it a legacy?
Just to say, Chair, I have an appointments meeting at 1 o'clock up at Garth School, so I'm going to have to leave the meeting. Thank you.
No worries. I thought you were going to say you would have to leave. I think I was saying, no, don't we be finished before 1? But no, that's fine, Councillor Edwards. Thank you very much for letting us know.
So, Chair,
right.
In terms of what's just been discussed on Strategic Regeneration Fund and the disparity of savings removed from education and social services but not communities, and what Councillor Williams has said now, how can we get consensus on a recommendation going forward from the committee there?
Think of the wording.
Do you want to say at the beginning, sorry, Councillor Williams, did you want to say at the beginning that whilst it's welcomed, whilst the 9.2% is welcomed, which has meant the protection of some services, or sorry, Councillor Williams has got his hand up.
I don't know whether I can come in there and just say that, look, I think we all acknowledge the fact that the Communities Director has been hit hard, and we would all love it if the Communities Director has had more funding so that we could support those services which are most visible within our communities. However, the fact of the matter is there are competing pressures across all directorates. So I'm just conscious of the fact that if we go back to Cabinet and say, oh, we want more funding for communities, or we want to protect this particular area, for example, as we've mentioned, the Strategic Regeneration Fund, they will just come back to us and say, well, what are your other suggestions then, guys? Come back to us with a meaningful suggestion about where we're going to actually save some money here, because there's no good in saying, well, we just don't like this MTFS proposal. We need to come up with some realistic alternatives. I'm just conscious of the fact that we're not actually necessarily doing that at present. We're just saying, no, we'd like to keep this fund because of the benefits and the merits of it, rather than saying, well, where are we going to find this £299,000 from? So I just find it difficult without all of the figures in front of us to actually find an alternative, if you know what I mean. So I'm fully supportive of Councillor Spanswick's view that the Communities Directorate has been hit hard and it does require more funding. It's just trying to find that alternative to allow it to have that funding. It's a very difficult situation that we're in to try and find these alternatives. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Councillor Spanswick, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just trying to square that off, I suppose. If we were to recommend, that cuts shouldn't take place in communities, and the saving or the money would need to come from one of the other directorates with the majority of the budget, be that education or social services, because they've had proposed cuts removed. Communities hasn't. So maybe it should be a re-looking at some of the cuts that's been taken out of the other two large directorates to make up the large chunk of the budget to allow at least one cut to be removed from the communities directorate. It's about balancing priorities again, I suppose, but I don't feel there's been a fair balance struck at the moment.
Okay. So,
is that the committee?
Councillor, yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to support John in what he's saying. I think we should still ask for it to be protected as much as we can. You know, why put something in front of us that may not be there? They may not come back and say, where are you going to get it from? Let's just ask. Thank you.
Councillor Alex Williams, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry, me again. I've observed all of the scrutiny overview committees just to get a feel for everything, and I think you will know, Chair, that because you sit on the Education Committee, that they said that they were going to make minimal changes to home to school transport services delivered in this year. Clearly, you know, we're looking at these directorates in isolation now across all scrutiny committees, which is regrettable in my view. I think we should have in future a full council meeting to discuss these so that we're all conscious of the budget pressures on all directorates. But it may be the case that we go back to Cabinet and say that these changes to home to school transport services should be brought forward to protect the communities directorate and to ensure that funding cuts do not occur to the communities directorate. So potentially that's an area which can be looked at.
Yes, yes, that you're quite correct there. That is something that has been put on that could do it, but the only question would be they're still waiting for the Welsh Government to release their report on that, and that'll be the only hamper to it, because they wouldn't want to change it until after the Welsh Government release their report. That would be the only the question they'd come back with. I'm trying to think of the wording of what we can put as a recommendation, because there is consensus that we should be protecting communities, and everyone I think is in agreement with that. Councillor Alex Williams makes a very good point that where would we find the extra funding from? And then we have the point about the regeneration fund, you know, in itself, let alone the others, because I think some are more palatable than others. You know, I think the committee is quite aware of that now. So we need to we need to think about putting some form of recommendation together. The only thing I could think of would be the committee, and this is obviously a very rough wording. The committee, unfortunately, understands the committee welcomes the 9.2% raise in its uplift from the Welsh Government in its RSG. We are disheartened to see cuts still being proposed to the Communities Directorate, especially in terms to the Regeneration Fund, because we believe Regeneration Fund is important for our future generations, and we wish that any cuts are the last resort to it, and that the Regeneration Fund is the one we would think that is protected the most on top of the list of savings to save. Stop this, just to stop. You know what I mean? Is that anywhere near something we can have as a consensus? That absolutely sounded like gobbledygook in my head, but I'm sure Meryl could turn that into English.
Sounds good, Chair. It's going in the right direction.
Councillor Alex Williams?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right. Meryl, I apologise. You have now turned that into English. So, right, we'll move on then. Does anyone else have any recommendations when it comes to the pressures or the reductions? Just pop your hands up. I didn't write down any more. Meryl, did you write down any potential ones?
Well, Chair, there's been a lot of questions asked and clarity, but it's whether members are satisfied with that or if they wish to make a recommendation about a specific point.
Yeah. Councillor Nora Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that obviously, you know, as Meryl said, we did ask quite a number of questions, and hopefully we will get that those questions answered. You know, such as what is the increase in tonnage as far as food waste and blue bag waste is concerned. You know, the tonnage had gone up, but we didn't know a percentage of how much it had gone up, etc., etc. So there were questions asked. I just hope that they will be answered. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. And there's a lot of further information points that we've asked for, like the tonnage percentage, because I think that will give us a better view of what it means for that budget pressure. Councillor Alex Williams.
The only other thing that I can think of from this committee meeting, we had a very lengthy discussion, didn't we? And all cabinet members and the chief executive and the corporate director came in on the discussion about discretionary services versus statutory services, and they gave some very comprehensive answers about the value for money for discretionary services, which actually brings in more than we spend. Spend on these services, so that's absolutely fine. The only recommendation that I can think of which could potentially be included is that, not necessarily an assurance that we row back on all of those discretionary services, because that would be foolhardy. But I don't know, potentially ask Cabinet to look at or examine the discretionary services to ensure that we're achieving value for money for those. Because I think Janine mentioned that 19 million out of her budget is statutory, and the 10 million out of her budget, out of the total 29 million, is discretionary. It's just to ensure that all of those discretionary services are delivering value for money for the local authority.
I think we can put that in. I don't see any problem with that. That should be an ongoing piece that officers should be doing all the time, so I don't see a reason why we can't put that in. Meryl?
Yes, Chair, I've got that. Thanks.
Sorry, you keep flashing at me, so I'm not quite sure if you're wanting to come in.
Sorry, I think it's because my mic is on and I'm typing, it's setting the mic off. Sorry, Chair.
That's all right. No, it just keeps, it's right in front of me. It just keeps flashing. You think you want to come in. Brilliant. Okay. Anything else? I'm not seeing any hands going up. I have nothing else. Meryl, have I missed anything?
Chair, I was just going to ask the members look out for the email today with the draft wording of these recommendations and come back quickly by tomorrow so that we can firm up the wording. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are also members here on other committees which will have had some of the emails already, and the remaining 2 committees will be through today.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. So yes, members, keep an eye out for them, and if you have any comments or thoughts on them, please go back ASAP, because these need to be written up for the report that goes out on Wednesday, I believe. So without anyone else flashing raising their hands at me, I am going to move on to agenda item 5, which is the urgent items, which I have none because no one told me of any 48 hours ago. So I'm going to call this meeting to a close at 12:14. We started at breakfast. It's now lunch. So I think we did well there. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance today. And I will see you all soon for our last meeting before election. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.